The rescue ship was a ghost. There is one time of the year when boat captains avoid crossing the Florida Straits off the north coast of Cuba and the Florida Keys. That is during the winter months, when the seas are unusually choppy and many unexpected wind and sea currents prevail, causing voyagers much distress, and sometimes worse. But the night in January when a little group of Cubans gathered aboard a leaky boat somewhere off Matanzas province in a hidden cove near Cardenas Bay on the north coast of Cuba, the weather and the conditions at sea could not have mattered less to them. Their only concern was escape. They had planned and waited for that night for months, and only one thing mattered: get away from Castro's red hell safely. Once this was accomplished, the 4 women, 2 men, and 3 children in the company were confident that God would take care of the rest. Somehow, the weather conditions and the tricky ocean currents did not worry them, nor did the 40-year-old leaky boat they had managed to outfit and make ready for their voyage. They believed that if God was willing, they would arrive in Florida safely, where they would be reunited with their exiled relatives and friends. They sailed out of the secluded cove in the dead of night, each person aboard tensed and anxious, fearful that the chugging sound of the engine would be heard by some of Castro's patrols. All went well. They had managed to leave the coastal waters of Cuba within several hours, and by morning found themselves in a vast sea with no land in sight. But as the day drew on, they knew they were in trouble. The leaky boat was beginning to take on water faster than they could bail it out, and the engine was beginning to falter. By noon, it stopped dead. Then the winds began to rise, and along with them, the seas grew increasingly rough. Buffeted by the wind and tossed around like a cork on the churning seas, the little band of people began to wish they had never left the communist stronghold in the Caribbean. It became obvious that the bout was not going to make it, and they would, in all probability, have to abandon the craft and hope for the best aboard the 9-man raft which had lashed to the roof of the cabin. Although the 2 men in the group had never been to sea before, they had common sense enough to realize that they had better make hasty preparations to launch the raft and stow their meager provisions aboard it. This was done, and not 5 minutes too soon, because the foundering wind boat started listing dangerously and then began to sink. They watched it go down from the safety of the survival raft, and without much ado turned away from the sputtering bubbles which marked the watery grave of the vessel, and put up the sail and the mast. The children were the first to get sick. Before long, as the elements unleashed the furies of an angry storm, all of them were so seasick that no one could attend to the navigation or the manipulation of the sail, not even when the gale force wind swept half of their provisions and the sail and mast into the sea, was anyone able to make the effort to salvage anything. Somewhere between sunset and sunrise on their second day at sea, they grew aware of something pulling the raft. One of the men, who had been slumped in a corner of the raft with his hand trailing in the water, noticed that there was a current running before them. He kept his wits and turned around to see an incredible sight. They were being towed by a large white yacht. He vaguely made out the name Marana, and muttering it over and over to himself, he lapsed into unconsciousness, too ill to wonder why the people aboard the yacht hadn't taken them off the raft and too weak from exposure to the sea and winds to have been able to do anything about it. On the morning of the day, they awoke one by one, feeling the warmth of a tropical sun beaming down. For the first time in days, they were able to sit up and feel like human beings again. Suddenly, one of the women stood up and began to shout, pointing to the east, where the faint outline of what appeared to be a small island could be seen in the blinding glare of the sun. They began to paddle toward it. When they reached the shore, they knelt in prayer. The man remembered the strange ship he'd seen towing them. He related what he had seen, and they exchanged perplexed looks. If a ship had really towed them to safety, why were they left in the raft? But before they could discuss it further, a low-flying plane swooped over the small spit of an island, dipped its wings, and headed north. Later that afternoon, a boat arrived to pick them up and take them to Nassau in the British West Indies. Weeks after that, after they had been taken to Miami, the refugee who had seen the ghost ship made inquiries of the Cuban boatmen along the Miami River. "You must be mistaken," he was told. "The boat you say you had seen, the Marana, sunk in the Atlantic Ocean some time ago." "Yes," the man shrugged and said, "perhaps you were right. I was delirious. It was out of my head, so I probably imagined it. Nevertheless, the fact remains that the refugees could not have drifted so many miles against the elements in so short a period of time. According to expert navigators who know those waters well, such a journey would have taken not 3 days, but at least 6 days of drifting, and only then, if the wind was not coming from the northeast, as it was at that time. Had the man who awakened from his delirium imagined he had seen a ghost ship towing them, or had he really seen it? The truth may never be known. But then again, what is the truth?